Oh, thank you. Okay, are we ready? All right. Thanks, Hillary. Thanks, Maggie, for checking in. I was like, I had an old link. I apologize, everyone, for making you wait a minute or two. So, hello. I'm very excited to be back. I was on vacation for a short time, really short time in Mexico, which it was lovely, full of sand and sunshine and a bit of solitude. There's a beach nearby where we go, and it's literally empty. It is so glorious, just you and the ocean and a really long sandy beach. So super fabulous. Happy to be home. Excited to get back into the swing of things and moving forward. So thank you for being here, all of you. We met with the guy who's doing the transitioning branding, and he presented several different things. And so we're really excited about some of the logos that he came up with, and gave him some ideas for tweaking. And he's at work right now and should have something for us here shortly. So once that's done, we'll be able to move forward. Other items are kind of waiting on the rebranding, because we are no longer CDA 2030 and want to only present as Connect Kootenai, and it's really important to have a strong brand behind a new name. So that's what we're working toward. So excited about that. Thank you to Taryn for your help recently. She did some stuff on the website for us and posted some stuff. So when you get an opportunity, you please go ahead and go on there. There was a newspaper article that went out, I believe on January 20th, talking about our new name in the Coeur d'Alene Press. I was not aware that was going to be in the paper. Just FYI, we were sort of waiting to roll out a true press release until later when we had rebranded, but we presented to Ignite, and they covered that from their meeting. So there you go. Anyway, super exciting. It's out there. We're excited to move forward. And then there's an innovative urbanism workshop this coming weekend that is on the website if you're interested in learning more about co-housing or communal living. I think Kiki will talk more about that as we move forward. Anyway, so that's some of the updates and update about the transition so far. So we're going to go toward, on the agenda, we're going to the 2023 priorities and work plan updates. And Maggie, you are up first with some exciting news from what I've been hearing on the streets.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's good to see you all, right? So, well, let's see. Greta, I wasn't quite sure exactly what you wanted me to address, but I can start out letting you know that we're still, I think, in the very initial stages with the University of Idaho. We have hired them again to take the housing availability and affordability study and drill down more granularly into what we're going to call the Housing Action Plan for Kootenai County, to try and give us an assessment of deficiency of units based by wage ranges, not only where we are currently with our deficit, but taking the 10-year projected growth for Kootenai County in those various wage classifications, so that we can give our county a target of what we need to build, for instance. And this focus really still is on home ownership, but it will include an assessment of rentals that are affordable, as defined by 30% of AMI. And I think home share will play a big role in that as well, as we get a better feel for how many really are being housed immediately with that inventory. So trying to take into consideration where we are as a county for all the different needs, with the primary focus on building homes that people can afford to buy. And so we're going to target 60 to 80%, 80% to 100%, and then 100% to 130% AMI. And right now we have, virtually no inventory. So it's kind of a slam dunk. If we could build all day, we wouldn't have enough to sell, right, based on the demand. But that I think it's progress. We still are trying to figure out exactly what the attack needs to be on the data side. And so I think probably by next week we'll be able to start working more with Greta and her team to start working on the surveys that need to be done, like we did last time. And Kiki was really instrumental in that last time in helping us get out the surveys to get real-time information. So there's that part. And then I don't know if you want to talk about the program, deed restriction program management. Greta, do you want me to talk about that as well?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
So, part of the hope, I think, with this housing action plan is to help us understand, and this is real relevant, I think, to all of us here on the phone call or on this Zoom call, like how many homes really are going to need to be in land trusts? We think 60 to 80% AMI are going to have to be in land trusts, right? Where the land is not part of the housing structure. And then, of course, the deed restricted homes so that we can assure communities as they're approving developments that include worker housing, that worker housing stays affordable in perpetuity, but they're full purchase. So land trust versus what I'm calling full purchase. And PAHA now has the full program. And in fact, Jack came and got to sit in on the presentation to the Idaho Building Contractors Association that occurred a couple of weeks ago in Boise. And I was able to lay out for the Idaho building builders and contractors exactly what it looks like for them to participate in this program. And the private market is what's going to drive our inventory, and we know that. And the jurisdictions hopefully will start to understand that the cooperation between the jurisdictions and the builders makes a lot of sense because we can promise them worker housing for 99 plus years. And PAHA's positioned to be able to do that because of the training and the program that it now has. And so that's what I presented to everybody. And I'll tell you, it was really telling when one of the major developers from Boise, after I got done with the presentation, he raised his hand and he said, no, wait a minute. Okay, let's just back up. You mean to tell me that the 10 homes that I built at no margin, in fact, slightly below cost, so I could put it in the hands of local workers who could afford these homes, only to find out 8 months later they had sold at market. We could have kept those affordable. And I said, exactly, right? I mean, so that's, I think, the real value in getting the word out to everybody that we can cooperate. We can do this. I think the private market can drive it sustainably. 80% is going to be tough to get into land and home, I think, right now. But anyway, so I think it was well received, and I'll be presenting again here in March to just the North Idaho group. And then I had one builder from Idaho Falls say, well, how do we get it down here? And Jack and I have talked about that. Really this is a plan that's not just unique to North Idaho. We have it. We've been trained on it. But it is a fabulous plan. You guys already know this, but just to repeat it, it's Fannie and Freddie approved and Fair Housing approved. And we can promise the jurisdictions under fair housing, we can say, all things being equal, we can give preference to your employees. So our 3 deed restrictions that we're really following are, number 1, AMI driven. You have to make a certain amount to even get qualified to look at the home to buy. It has to be your primary residence. And there will be a resale formula limiting the accretion to keep it affordable over time. But if everything is equal and we've got 2 households looking at that same home, we can give preference to the city employees of that jurisdiction that is approving it. That's not a violation of fair housing. We can't guarantee it, but we can say that we can give preference, all things equal. So the Idaho Falls, I'll be in contact with them to try and figure out, and Ketchum is looking at the same program, right? Ketchum already has its housing action plan. We're modeling that to some degree, but I think we're going to try and, we're going to drill down a little more granularly than even they have. But I think it's something that the state is starting to catch on to, which is pretty exciting. I don't know, Jack, do you want to add anything to this?
No, Maggie, I think you covered it pretty well, and I think you're right. I think everybody in the whole state, those that were there, like I said, Idaho Falls, Boise, the developer that was up in your way. I mean, they were all very interested in learning more about it. So it all just makes sense. If you can take land value out of the sales price formula, it makes it more affordable for a lot more people.
So I don't know if you guys have any questions. It just takes time, right? It takes education. And I've met now since that meeting with 3 builders here locally, trying to figure out how do they make it work. So I think, and there are local builders. I can tell you that. They know that they want their people to live where they work. So. And that's all I have.
Great, thanks,
There are
Maggie.
questions, yeah.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions for Maggie? And then we'll use that study that is being done, and we were talking about some other questions with Jeannie here just a little while ago. So we'll use that study moving forward to make sure that we can educate and inform. So
I think it's aggressive. We will not have it in April. We had hoped we would have it in April, but where we are right now, in talking with Steve Peterson, the lead U of I guy on it, I think it'll be toward the end of May.
okay.
Yeah.
And Brooke, you have a
Brad?
question?
Okay.
Yeah, Maggie, Greta,
Mhm.
this is such a great sounding study. I'm glad that you guys are looking on building on the past study. This is incredible information. I'm just thinking of, adoption and collaboration with cities and counties in that process, because it's hard when an outside group, creates a plan without full buy-in from the city. Like, I mean, it's a good plan and it needs to be done. And I think it's amazing that you guys are taking the initiative to do this. Do you have a sense of the level of commitment from leadership of how they're going to help support implementation of this action plan?
I think that has to be a key component of it. I think we were hoping to have a target to begin with. And what's being brought into this is really the available land and the permitting that's going on in each of the jurisdictions to try and then, I think, meet with them and figure out, how do we really start collectively and individually as individual municipalities working toward this, but we just don't even have a target, right, to educate people. And so I think and we're working with the jurisdictions, right, and the county just to gather the data. But it'll be a lot like the last report in that that while there's a lot of back and forth in terms of the data gathering, I think that the U of I will issue its findings that way. And then hopefully we can go and meet with each of the jurisdictions. Does that make sense? Or Brooke, if you have any suggestions on how to do this differently, boy, we are so open. Right?
Yeah, it's such a hard question, because obviously it would be great if, leadership from cities and counties would be investing in this idea and, being the drivers of it, because it's a lot easier to own the plan when you're driving it. And
Yes.
even if it's a great plan, I mean, I just noticed this when I worked in Wyoming, is outside groups had the time, they had the money, the community support to build out these kinds of plans, whether it was housing or water quality. And I mean, it's great because nobody was doing it. And there was that vacuum, that need for that data and those strategies. And it's just, I mean, it's just easier if it's something that from day one, the cities and the counties have ownership of and are implementing and are putting their own money and time into. And I mean, how to go about getting that, I don't know that I have more articulate thoughts on. It's just, I know it's a challenge having worked outside government to try and get government to do something, even when you're bringing in those resources, these incredible, really valuable resources.
Yeah.
Kiki, you're on mute.
We kind of touched on this at one point, Brooke and Maggie, and maybe you two can just, because I think Brooke is kind of articulating one of the questions we brought up at the work group. And Maggie, I don't think you were at that meeting. But basically what the question was is, and it could be a confusion maybe in just the title, but the action plan kind of infers to, how did that come up? It was more like, is this a duplication of creating the toolkit and the actual implementation type items that the Connect Kootenai is putting forward, versus this is the target and the data and the facts and identifying the needs that says this is how we need to get there as a team. And I think we were looking at trying to get some sort of qualification on the definition of those two, whether the action plan that PAHA is doing is basically a plan that says, here's the number of houses, here's the tools you are going to move forward to get there, or is it the data that supports the toolkit effort of the partnership and all of the items that are being developed within this particular conversation. So maybe that is a point of clarification.
Yeah, it's the latter. Thanks, Kiki. It's the data. Right, it's where are we in Kootenai County with respect to the affordability amongst the different industries and wage earners.
Mhm.
Okay, and so maybe action plan isn't the right term. Maybe we can think about that, and we can reword it if that's confusing. I didn't realize it was a confusing term as much as it is just it's a rudder for the ship with more definition. We called the first report a rudder for Kootenai County ship, right? To
And
get
this-
everybody on the same page and understanding, just the need.
Yeah, and this kind of has been, in my mind, one of the questions that was brought to this group a lot was, if we don't know what the target is, how do we know when we get there? What are we shooting for? What areas? And so this is the, the silver bullet that says, here's the wage area, the types, the housing needs, what we need, and, and what our future looks at. And like Taryn just mentioned, how about housing needs forecast, something along those lines maybe. And then Brooke, I think that
We could use that. I like that. Who said that? The housing needs
Taryn.
forecast?
Yeah, Taryn.
Oh yeah, I like that, Taryn, a lot. Okay. I think that
That might clarify.
that
a
is
little
more
bit.
clarific. Yeah, I think so, right? Yeah.
And then the evolution of what's happening with Connect Kootenai on housing and growth is that this is the roadmap to get to the numbers that the data is telling us is forecasted. So, and all of the different tools and all of the different things available to everyone to get there would come out of what this group is doing. So thank you for letting me jump in, Maggie. I know you weren't here, so you were kind of like behind the curve, and I just wanted to make sure that everyone had a good explanation from that source. So housing forecast makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it's tough, you guys, on the apartment side, right? Because the market really can't do apartments at 30% AMI. It's just really tough. So that's going to be a tough one for us to factor in, I think, on this. We know we've got our HUD funded rentals, right? Those are guaranteed, but for the market to do it, I just don't. That's a real curveball. But I think we'll try and figure in, because not everybody wants to own a home. I think the majority of people would if they felt like they could achieve it. But there still are those who don't want the burden of a home. So we're trying to figure out how do we factor that in. So if anybody has ideas on that would be great.
I think, Maggie, too, that I think that, and I know Kiki, you had said something about apartment buildings at one point and how they were like going to step the rent or the builder builds so many and then some fall off every year, so to speak. And then I think James was also talking about like condo homes that may be more affordable, that could service some of that demographic. So anyway, I think that's what this is all about, is for the brainstorming and the ideas to come to fruition so that we can take the ideas, put them into the toolkit, and then move those ideas forward to see where we can land. And with the data that the housing needs forecast will give us, it gives us a stronger platform to stand on to say, hey, this is what we need for, fill in the blank AMI. Go ahead, James.
Well, if I can just add, one of the things that's useful about what PAHA is going to illustrate, there are people who are buying down the list of types of units that they would buy because an available home that's as nice as they would like is actually not available because the supply isn't there. And so you have this impact where buyers of every income category gets pushed either up or down from where they would like to be based on what the supply is available. So sometimes it's hard to know until you can see every level of the housing column exactly what the impact is, because people who wouldn't necessarily buy a less expensive or alternate unit, mobile homes are a great example of this.
Yeah.
They are wildly more expensive than they used to be because people are just looking for a place that they could buy at all, right? And so that's the kind of thing that illustrates, is where supply at all levels can actually impact the availability of those units at the lower end, because the people who would like to move up and on just are stuck waiting for that supply to become available.
I got a question for you too. As we start looking at the study and start doing it, I mean, obviously we're going to be looking at Kootenai County. Is there a way when they do the analysis to break it down into the municipalities that are participating in this?
I would tell you, Mom Seeley, that Post Falls has like fabulous data, right?
Yeah, I know.
I know.
out of my office. Just kidding.
So I think so, right? Especially for Post Falls is a really good example, right? Of data that's really available online and that they can pull from. Kootenai County too, David and his group have been really cooperative, but some of the other jurisdictions not as easy. But again, that's a lot of that I think is just letting them understand why and what we're trying to do and where do we go. And this is, I think, a bit of this is going to be the bigger challenge in this particular, I love this name, Housing Needs Forecast. It's going to be more challenging because we're trying to get more granular with where the needs actually are, right? And we've got a lot of wage data to evaluate on that front, as well as just permits, what land is available. And also I do want to clarify, so PAHA is doing this again in partnership with the CDA EDC or Jobs Plus. So both groups are again sponsoring this. So PAHA has been mentioned a couple of times. So I gotta make sure I give a shout out to Jobs Plus on this as well for wanting to do it.
Okay, thanks, Maggie. I know you had your hand up, Victoria, but we, and if you have a question, I'd love to hear it at the end, but we still need to get through the subcommittee reports as well. So let's move through there. And then if you want to ask it during the resident-owned community time too, Victoria, that'd be awesome. But let's keep moving forward so that we're keeping our meeting to an hour. So Idaho Housing, IHFA.
Sure, I really don't know that I have a whole lot as far, we're about 2 weeks out from the second round of the Idaho Workforce Housing applications. We're trying to work through the necessary documents for the first round of commitments and trying to make sure that those are still going to be financially feasible given a rising rate environment.
Yeah.
It's even a struggle. I mean, that was just back in end of 2022, and we're hearing that there's still some gaps. So we know as well as you that it's just a struggle to do housing in general. And Maggie, to your point, the only way to do 30% is with some type of a federal resource, regardless of where you're putting those. I'm not going to get into any details, but I do want to mention we are closing on a final transaction that's truly workforce rental housing that, if we can make it replicable, could be amazing. And it's geared at 80 to as high as 140 AMI. So it's truly kind of that workforce housing. This is the first one. It's been a brain drain, but it's in Blaine County. So, but it's kind of really exciting if it can be a model that can be replicated to meet that segment that's above where we have federal resources to assist with. So Jack will chime in if I miss something, but that's kind of where we're at right now.
That sounds exciting, Corey. Yeah, keep us abreast of what's going on with that.
Will do.
Thanks. And then Josh, no.
Jared.
Jared. I was
Yeah.
like, his name was right. I was like,
He's our new working group member,
Jared.
Jared McFarland.
Hi,
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hey, Jared.
The new president for the Coeur d'Alene Regional Realtors. So a little new to the group. I did sit in some meetings last year with Kiki and I, so I do have an idea of the program. I met with Lindsay last week. Lindsay Allen has really been spearheading this for us, and chatted with her last week a little bit. So I think what our goal is this year really is just to get a task force put together to help with fundraising and just use our resources to really kind of help get the word out about everything here. So in talking to Lindsay, we're just getting everyone on board, the board of directors all on board at the beginning of the year, working through some budget and some priority stuff. So we haven't made a lot of progress, so not a major report. But hopefully next meeting we'll have some kind of an update, and I'll be working with closely with Lindsay on how we best move forward to help with the project.
So quick question. So Jared, in wrapping up loose ends where I left information and putting the team together with Lindsay, do you guys have a time frame whereby you might want that information in a presentation together to kind of move you into the leadership role of that? Is that like within weeks, within months, or you have a feel for that?
I think we love the idea of within weeks, but it may be a few weeks, I think, before we get to that point, maybe a month before
Okay.
I'm realistic on that.
I'll just be sure to refresh all the right connections of the right players and make sure Greta knows that so that you can have all your questions answered when your team's put together.
Okay, that'd be great.
Thanks, Kiki. All right, Victoria. And thanks, Jared. Oh, so none, I'm Victoria, I apologize. Carrie or Carrie on, I can't
Carrie.
see all the people. Carrie.
Hi. Hi, everybody. I'm Carrie Ward with HomeShare Kootenai County. I'm happy to give you an update on HomeShare. We do have a live, are taking applications. We are receiving applications. It's going great. We have not made any matches. Our pool of applicants isn't big enough that we've made any quality matches or, matches yet, but let me tell you about some of the listings that we do have. Just as an example of the kind of things that we're getting. And these listings, we have put them on our website now. But for instance, we have a furnished daylight basement bedroom here in Coeur d'Alene near Silver Beach Marina for $800 a month. There's a furnished bedroom and bathroom for $600 a month. A furnished room off of Highland Drive between Post Falls and Coeur d'Alene for $400 a month rent. So it's kind of exciting that, those are definitely worth, under market rate. So we're going to be adding affordable housing units as soon as we get the quality matches that we need. So send us your leads. If you have anybody that you know that has a spare room or that's seeking affordable housing. Also, we're probably going to add not only our listings for rooms, but maybe even listings for seekers, because we even have somebody that wants to park a tiny, willing to pay $500 to park a tiny home somewhere. A 27-year-old and a 25-year-old want to park a tiny home somewhere. So we're getting all kinds of interesting things and a lot of interesting clients coming in, and we're excited to be making matches soon. And next month, I'm sure I'll be able to report numbers of how many.
So Carrie, just to be sure, and thank you for letting me butt in, you guys, I have a history with this, so I just want to share information. But so the people that you are putting on your website are ones that have already been through the application and the background check and the vetting process?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. And so then what's happening is it's a matter of there's a lot of applicants. They're coming in a lot of home providers. It's a matter of finding the right match for the right person. And so that's kind of the stage that you're in right now, but you can accept a lot more home seekers because the portal and the website are open. And if you can share that, any of you listening with your constituents and your membership organizations to let them know, it does take large pools to get those folks matched up, but there's a big interest out there.
So am I hearing this correctly, that you have a number of providers and you have some seekers, but they just aren't matched
That's
up
right.
with the criteria that you want?
That's correct. They're either either smoking or non-smoking, or somebody doesn't want to do stairs or something like that is why they're not matching.
If I can add though. Sorry, Kiki, go ahead.
I just said we have to cast a wider net.
But I think it's going to be an awareness thing. I know that we are looking at a young individual who wants to come to this area for an AmeriCorps position that we are working on. And the number one challenge is having a place to stay that they can afford based on that program. So as this gets to be more, widely known, I think you're going to see there's a lot of places where this can impact and make a lot of sense. So I appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's a question. So do you think it's taking off with awareness, or is it still slow? Is it, I mean, how is the word getting out in your opinion? Is it where you want it to be
Well,
right now?
Well, I'll be honest with you, Maggie. At first, we had a kind of a soft launch without a big push because I felt like there was a lot of people that knew that home share was coming. And so when we put the applications live, we wanted to see what was going to happen with, how many we were going to get and how many, because it's time consuming to process the applications and run the background checks and do references. So again, we were worried about being inundated, but now that we have had 2 weeks underneath us and our pool of applicants is growing, we need to push it. We need to push it out a little bit more with social media and groups. Now that our soft launch is done, we kind of have a little bit of a process.
Great.
It was intentional. The board kind of agreed to do that. They didn't want to do any marketing. They wanted to work out all the bugs and make sure that we processed providers and seekers and worked out the policy and procedures and everything so that we wouldn't be inundated to make mistakes. Want to do it right right out of the chute.
Right.
Now it's time to kind of spread the word, and then we've got all the ambassadors and such in place. I'm speaking only because I'm still the at-large board member. So
yeah, right.
Jumping in to help carry on that. But yeah, it was kind of intentional to do it with baby steps.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. Make sure that when you are ready and you have something written up that you share it with everyone and we could post it social media.
Okay.
Thanks, hon.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Victoria, you're up.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I guess I did have my hand raised before and I can talk about it now. I think that when we're talking about the below 60% AMI, those are your residents in manufactured housing. Like that is the population that I work with most frequently. And so as we work to preserve those housing units, that's part of the conversation. So we still have not had a owner reach out to us. However, we still have more and more resident groups reaching out, wanting to be prepared for resident ownership. So that continues to happen, continues to work with those resident groups so that they can organize themselves, incorporate, and then notify their owner. I do want to share that this is changing the landscape in Kootenai County or in Latah County now. I have been starting to work with Latah County residents in the same way that I'm working with Kootenai County residents. So when Maggie was talking about that, this is now a statewide issue, and the work that we're doing here is being replicated across the state. That is absolutely true. And I think that the more that we raise an awareness, the more people are going to know about it. So the same thing with home shares that you're just talking about. We just need to keep talking, and we need to keep being present in the media and in conversations. So that's where I am right now, just continuing to have conversations. We are also looking at potentially some legislative changes to the statute to make the statute a little bit more broad, to allow residents the opportunity to purchase should the owner intend to sell the park, not just intend to list the park. So we're trying to work on those legislative changes as well. Yeah, that's basically my update right now.
So Victoria, have you heard anything back from the legislators that were forwarded that message?
I have not. We continue to push and continue to, I would say that I am not hopeful that it will happen this session, but I think that the more awareness that is raised, and the more time that we continue to push, and the more residents across the state that push, the better. I think that there's, go ahead.
There might be an opportunity at one point for you to put a request for letters to legislators to explain what the 2 or 3 word changes in the language could mean across the state. And if there's other counties getting involved, then maybe that would be something this group could take a look at supporting or not, depending on what their membership decided somewhere down the road. But if you want to do a presentation to get back to this group at some point, then it might be clearer to what they need what you need for that legislative change to occur, because it didn't seem like it was a really big one.
No.
But it could be impactful in just kind of some of the mechanics. So
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'm happy to make that presentation. Absolutely.
Just a quick comment. This is a very challenging legislative session because of all the new. So I mean, we are very involved because of other issues. I don't think you're going to see much happen this year just because there's so much new over there and they just don't have a clue.
Completely agree, Corey. And Corey, I think Bart was actually going to reach out to you, and we're going to try and schedule a conversation with you
Okay.
about some stuff. But yes, completely agree. I think more so just awareness at this point that this is something that will be coming down the pipeline definitely in 2024.
Okay, thanks. And then in the chat, Victoria, I see you're in your car. I'm just going to tell you that Taryn said you might consider doing a press release or a My Turn column in the press regarding legislative changes and impact they could have. So just throwing it out there.
I haven't looked at the Inlander article is coming out shortly. So absolutely.
Nice.
Yes. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, Jeff.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would say I think much of the work of the school subcommittee has stalled a little bit. When we first started, we were working with some representatives from NIC. Some of those have moved on to other positions and they're kind of embattled in their own struggles. Some of what we've been working on are things that we've pushed into the legislative level as well, and kind of in pretty to the discussion we were just having. I think some of those are going to be slow moving. Probably not going to see a lot of impact in this legislative session as well. And I've shared on some of those specifically over the last couple of months with this group as well. I would say, I think, affordable housing continues to be such a huge challenge for the people that we represent as large employers in this area within the school districts. So I appreciate the work that this group is doing. I appreciate some of the real tangible results that we've seen recently with some of the carve-outs for workforce housing and some of the recent developments. I think those are big wins for our employees. In planning for this meeting, talking with Greta, I was kind of sharing that I didn't feel like I had a lot to share. She suggested that I maybe take a few minutes just to update on the upcoming school district's levies. And I think that does relate to some of the work that we're doing here as well. So as I'm sure you've heard, all three of the school districts in Kootenai County have levies that are going to be on the ballot in March. I would point out we use the March levy election because that gives us the runway that we need to build our budgets for a July 1st fiscal year that starts for us. There's been some talk about taking that March date off the ballots at the legislative level, and that would really hamstring us in leaving only May available for us with such a little runway to build our budgets and approve those. The levies that are coming before the community this time are what we call the supplemental levy. Those are levies that come every 2 years as a renewal. We started to coin those fundamental levies. Those have become really fundamental to our operating budgets. And, so every 2 years they come back for a vote. And many people often think, well, the school district is coming and asking again. And, the thing I want to point out is for the most part, these are renewal levies that are being asked. And so we've started to coin the term, these levies are fundamental to our budgets, right? They've been embedded in our budgets for so long. And so, some people ask, well, why do you need these levies? I would say the state significantly underfunds education. Idaho is 51st out of 51 for per pupil spending. So that leaves us to a point in the way the legislature structures the funding from schools that we need to go to the local taxpayers to ask for things that the state doesn't fund. If you look across the board, and I'm not going to get into the specifics of each school district's levy, they're similar, but they have little different nuances in them. I'd point you to their websites for the district that you would represent, if you have specific details or questions about what those levies are. But, just to give a few examples, there's things like the school resource programs, nurses in schools, sports, extracurricular activities, all of those things are not funded by the state. And that's what these supplemental levies support. So that's why they're important to us. I've seen some literature that's out there that has been talking about the impact of these levies, and they're throwing out the large number of what these levies are on the tax bill. But what they're failing to account for is that these are renewal levies. And so that, the current existing levy will roll off the books at the end of this school year. And then if these levies pass, would replace those levies. So I think it's really important to remember that these are renewal levies. And, you know, yes, a couple of the school districts do have some increases with those. But for the most part, the main bulk of these levies are renewals. And then I think, you know, a couple of the things that it's really important to point out in regards to these is, you know, average teacher salaries. I think all three of the school districts can say we pay above the state average of what the state funds for our teachers. We need to make up that difference somewhere. And I would say we still really underfund our teachers, especially if you compare to, you know, what is just west of us across the state line with what teachers are making. And so we need to be really cognizant of that so that we don't continue to lose good staff to the west of us. You can say the same thing for classified salaries. So those are our hourly employees. So those are our custodians, our food service workers, our transportation drivers, our classroom aides, our crossing guards, you know, things like that. The state funds $11.75 an hour for any of those classified employees, no matter what they make. So I may have an HVAC tech that is highly qualified, highly certified, that makes well above $11.75 an hour. That's what the state funds us for that employee. And so again, we have to make up the difference for that. That's what these levies are for. You know, as we talk about affordability of housing, that's the conversation in this group that we have each and every month that we come together. You know, I would say 2 young married teachers, you know, just starting out in the profession wouldn't qualify to buy houses in this community. So that's why this is important to us. And that's why we also need to take a really look at our wages, and that's what some of these levies are designed to supplement. So again, I'd encourage you to check out the websites for each school district. So that's the supplemental levy. And then I know Lakeland and the Coeur d'Alene School District both have school plant facility levies that are going to be on the ballot as well. Those are a separate ask. So there's going to be 2 questions for those 2 school districts. Those are to cover deferred maintenance in the districts. And again, I hear people say, well, you know, why aren't you managing those within your budgets? And the state funds very little for that deferred maintenance. In fact, very little at all. You know, we get some revenue out of the lottery funds. You know, for me in Coeur d'Alene School District, that's barely enough to cover some of my trade professionals that I have, you know, plumbers, electricians, HVAC on my staff to, you know, maintain the 20 buildings, the 20 school sites that we have in our district. And I know that's the same for each of the other school districts as well. So that's what those asks, you know, generally are about. One of the things I hear that I think really pertains to this group too is, you know, people say, well, why doesn't development pay for that? You know, we know there's a lot of growth happening here and here. And I think I'd respond 2 ways to this group for that. You know, one, the state doesn't allow schools to collect impact fees. So there is no revenue coming in directly from development that we're allowed by law. And 2, I think you could also make the argument that, you know, development does contribute to this to some degree. We're a levy-based system. And so I think there's this misnomer that as property values go up, as new people move in, the schools should be flush with money, right? Because there's just more people that are contributing to that. That's not the case in a levy-based system. And so in a levy-based system, you know, the levy rate actually goes down as more people are contributing to that. And so that's why we can say we would, you know, even with these levies passing, there might be minimal increases, or in many cases, flat tax rates that are coming with this. And so I think it's important to really recognize the difference between a levy-based and a rate-based system. I think a lot of people get confused on that. It's a very complicated, very confusing system. But I think you can say that growth and development has, you know, kept that levy rate low for all the school districts. In fact, I think if you look at a statewide average of the levy rates, the 3 school districts in CUNY County have some of the lowest levy rates across the state. So I would say we do a lot with the little that we have. And so, you know, with that, I'm sure there's a lot of very specific questions. You know, I'd point you to the websites for those and really just say, please get out and vote on March 14th.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, make sure you do your homework, everyone, on what those are for. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, Mr. Callahan, open space.
Tomorrow we have a staff meeting with our bond counsel and municipal advisor to ensure that we're on track for a November election. Assuming they say yes, and we'll go to the Board of County Commissioners and get the final authorization, and then we'll be working with Taryn on messaging. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Thank you.
He appeared muted for the first part. What bond are you talking about?
$50 million bond across the Kootenai County.
For open
for open
space?
space.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Which was one of the top priorities that came out of the housing survey, as you guys remember. So thank you for that, David. And then regional healthcare and public safety officials. Kiki, I think that's you, right?
Yeah, and I'm watching the clock for you, so I'm gonna scream
you.
through about 4 items really fast so you can get through the rest of your agenda. I've got 3 projects in the public safety and healthcare workers that are in progress, not ready to report on stuff, but we'll have it for you next month. So I wanted to tell you that. The communal living, as you referred to earlier, it was a conversation we brought up at work group because there's been a number of groups who've talked about different types of housing here, actually across the Northwest, which could include building or retrofitting complexes to be more of a communal style of a program that could possibly add density to existing buildings or create density that has shared facilities within them. Or the other facet to this that has been discussed is getting together and doing research on what our policies throughout the county are on group home type of living situations, and if there's something that we could do to encourage or to put some good safety sidebars on how that might move forward with some language tweaks that might make it easier for some of those types of homes to come together. We're not getting into let's do government funded homes for niche areas of the population that are already being taken care of. It's sort of a new horizon look of kind of joint community living. So there's that. It's still in conversation. I just wanted to tell you that I think this group should consider talking in maybe an executive group or at their board meeting about taking some positions on some of these toolkit items and bringing forward this information to city councils throughout the region so that they know what's happening here when there are conversations about annexations or ordinance changes or things that this becomes more connective, as you said, with Connect Kootenai, to bring some of those position statements forward. For example, Coeur d'Alene dealing with a short-term rental ordinance, it would be great if there were surveys that could go out through this group because it's got a lot of members with a lot of opinions, but we could pull together some good deeper community data on what the community thinks about how those ordinances go as that moves forward. I wanted to just mention before I leave that in the development agreements in Coeur d'Alene, as you all have probably been reading in the paper, this group deserves a big round of applause for, and Maggie especially, this latest annexation agreement conversation isn't a discussion anymore. It actually includes deed restrictions and limits, and actually includes first right of refusals for property that, you know, can help us with this, whatever the target market in the housing needs forecast ends up being. It isn't a discussion anymore, it's actually occurring. And so I just wanted to, it's not done yet, but I just wanted to say that it's here, and all we have to do now is as a team, continue to educate our decision makers and our home builders and our realtors groups on what these tools are and how we can use them. So that's all for me for now, thanks.
Thanks, Kiki. Well done. So the annual rental housing survey, once that actually is sent out, we'll need your help to send that out to all of your people that you know, constituents and cities and so forth. I think Hillary can, you guys did this last year. I was not here, so I think you could probably speak a little bit better.
Sarah's probably the best one on that one, just to talk about kind of duplicating the effort that was done last May.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. We plan on getting our group together to duplicate our survey. We did it May last year, so we'll do it May again this year so that it's as, it's not scientific, but maybe as close as we can get. We surveyed both tenants and landlords. So we have 2 versions of that survey. I think we did over 5,000 units for property managers, and we had a couple thousand people participate in the other one. So we're hoping to get pretty similar numbers. One thing that I'll kind of relate to some of the earlier conversation with Maggie and that sort of thing is we'd like to maybe include that with like when we do a press release on that information like we had done last year, that we maybe add some other elements of like a community dashboard or some kind of target goals of, hey, we've identified the community has this many units short, and are we making progress towards that? And so we'll probably end up doing a public records request for most of the municipalities for you know, permits, certificates of occupancy issued. And then this one might be a little harder, but maybe the number of units approved through their planning and zoning throughout the year, they won't be started, but maybe it's something that we can note that we're making progress. So we'd like to do some things like that to maybe start trending towards the goal, I guess, and showing our successes. And then we can release that with a newsletter or press release at that time. So we'll be working closely with Maggie on those things and this group as well. If there's anything that, you know, like if HomeShare has a great story, once they've matched somebody that we can add, you know, some of those things and report back to the community, it would be nice to show, hey, these are things that are working and get people talking about solutions. So that's kind of looking forward to the May, June timeline on that. I guess, do you want me to continue down this list, Greta? There's a couple others. Another piece of that is we've tentatively picked a date for a joint planning workshop that we did last fall. It looks like maybe we're kind of going to shoot for November 2nd. Seems like that maybe extra week in the October-November timeline that we can maybe get connected with councils to do a joint meeting. But in the meantime, before we get there, we had kind of thought 2 a year might be a good goal long-term, but right now we don't have a ton of things differing from our fall workshop. So we might individually meet with municipalities and chat about the toolkit and options, and then you know, have a dialogue and be able to answer their questions that will give us some additional feedback, because I think each city has a little bit different perspective on that, and maybe some things work better in different areas than others. So we would like to connect with people in the meantime, sometime between now and November. And I guess, Greta, do you want to talk about the idea of a community open house?
Yeah, so we'd like to invite not only the supporting partners of Connect Kootenai, but all of the working group and advisory partners to come together and just really be able to have some conversations, celebrate the successes made thus far. Because what I find is that being in a room with a whole bunch of other really engaged people, there are other outcomes that can come from that, just like they do here in this meeting. So I wanted to kind of open it up and see if we can all come together and for us also to say thank you for the work that's been done and moving forward. We had talked about a location, but if you have any ideas on a great location for a meeting that could house about 50 people or so, please go ahead and just email or call me or text or whatever, and let's talk about some different options. We because we're working regionally, we would like to do something perhaps even in Post Falls or Rathdrum or Hayden. We may do multiple, I'm not sure. We do have a free space downtown Coeur d'Alene, but so we're just looking at some options, and I think that as we move forward, we'll figure it out. And yeah, maybe even the regional realtors building may be a really good space because they have some parking there as well. So that's that. And then we have just a few minutes. Anybody have any questions?
Sure.
For?
Yeah, I do, please. This said, hey, David, that $50 million bond and the like, has there been any projection as to how much land could possibly be acquired should that pass and the like?
No, not at this time.
Okay. So it's just a matter of seeing if there's an appetite for it, and then if so, moving on from there.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Ed, I'll share that initially there were a couple of parcels identified, but it's taken a long time to get there. And so they may not be available. So that was kind of where we're at. There's some open space that people want to preserve, but it's private property. So they would have to be willing to sell. And so there just isn't a lot of that. There isn't a lot of it left. But it is an effort that the people initially wanted and were very vocal about, as you know. And so I'm proud of the county for following through on that and trying to do anything that is possible.
And we'll see what the people say when it goes to the vote. That'll determine it.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here today and for your participation and engagement. We are really looking forward to hearing back from the surveys that have been sent out. So make sure that you fill those out and get those back to us, because we need to, your voice matters. And we want to make sure that we are moving forward with the vigor and with the enthusiasm to carry us all through and make sure that we continue to make an impact based on everything you guys have already done so far. So thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.